everyone. This is Matt with Deep Woods Paranormal, coming to you from the Deep Woods Paranormal office this afternoon. I am going to be talking about Joe's camp today. Unfortunately, we were not able to have Joe on, but his video, the show for his property, is going to be coming on to YouTube here tomorrow. So I wanted to do a special podcast and kind of talk about the things that we experienced up there that are pretty much not on the show. If you heard me talking about Bigfoot research before and my encounters, I would say I've had at least a dozen encounters up there where I can't say this is anything else but a Bigfoot. I've tried to rule out everything. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a mountain lion, it wasn't a deer, it wasn't anything else. This is where I can say that I know for sure this was a Bigfoot. I've seen so many of them in my lifetime now that I'm starting to get used to what to look for as I do the research. That said, so what did we find at Joe's camp? We found a crap ton of evidence. We spent we're still researching up there, but we spent a couple years researching his property now. We've kind of let things settle over the last year, I would say. After we did so much research up there, we wanted to let the Bigfoots kind of calm back down and resettle, because Joe had actually, unfortunately, had to have a lot of his trees removed on his property. The reason being is that he had bark beetles and he was very concerned about fire danger and had some recent lightning strikes that actually hit a few of his trees. Didn't start a fire, thank God, but did hit a few of his trees. He had 300 pine trees on his property. They were beautiful trees, and it was very sad to see them go, but he is planning on replanting. And the Bigfoots are still there. They're still very active, but their behavior's changed. They were a little aggressive after he cut down the trees. I don't know if he says this in his interview or not, but essentially he was telling me when I first met him that, they throw rocks in my trailer, they've rocked my trailer, they've done all this other stuff to my trailer when they get angry. So let me start back from the beginning, because many people are going, what's Joe's camp and where is this at, and who is Joe? So Joe is somebody that responded to a Facebook advertisement I had put up on Facebook, our main page. We were looking for Bigfoot clientele. If you do your research, you'll find out, if you follow all the sightings, which I've done, there are a lot of sightings along the Texas-Louisiana border, and that's pretty much where his camp is. He's right in the middle of the forest. He's real close to Jackson, Texas, which is supposed to be the Bigfoot capital of Texas. His property, like I said, is right in the middle of the Sabine National Forest. And essentially what happens is, as we did our research, we figured out that they were crossing across his property night and day, essentially crossing from one side of the forested area across through his property, because they kind of hide real easy because he was the only one with a whole lot of trees on his property. And they were cutting through, and they were fascinated by what he was doing. Essentially, they were watching him and stuff like that. He caught multiple glimpses of them, and then they'd either freeze or they'd disappear back into the brush. Seems like they're very curious animals. They seem like they like to watch, but they don't like to be seen, and once they're seen, they just they're trying to look like trees. In fact, I had an encounter where Joe and I were sitting out in the middle of his camp, next to his trailer. We were just taking a break. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think we were eating sandwiches and some chips and stuff, and I looked up, and Joe has several little trails that go up through into the forest in his property that lead to the back of his property and onto other properties near him, because he has a lot of family out there, family and friends that basically sometimes will come down into his property with his permission. So essentially we're sitting there and I'm looking up and I'm going, wait a minute. And this is about 100 feet away. I'm going, where did that tree come from? And the more I stare at it, I'm going, wait, that just doesn't look right. So I sat there and I grabbed the binocular really carefully. I really slowly kind of grabbed it and carefully put it up to my eyes so I didn't spook whatever was going on. And as I'm sitting there staring at this thing, I'm like, holy crap. There's a freaking Bigfoot standing in the middle of the trail. It had its legs kind of spread one in front of the other, and then it had its arms, one in front, one in back, kind of like the Patterson-Gimlin film where it's in the middle of the stride. Maybe I caught it mid-stride, I don't know. But it wasn't moving at all, and its head was actually turned towards us. And it was looking straight at us. This one was black, solid black fur. And I took the binocular, and I could actually see the face, which is something I've never experienced before. And this is a daytime sighting, which was awesome. So I'm looking at it, I'm going, holy crap. I could see the mouth, I could see it didn't look human. It looked more like an ape or a monkey type mouth. It had the real thin lips. I could see the nose, and it didn't have any, where the mouth was. If you imagine the bottom of our chins and up towards where our nose is and right about where we end our smiles, there was a circle there with no hair. But you could see the wrinkles in the skin and stuff like that. I can still see it to this day. And one of the things Joe has always said is some of them, not all of them, some of them look like they're wearing sunglasses. And I'm like, okay. And I've heard that Bigfoots maybe have bioluminescence around their eyes so they can see at night. And so that made sense to me. And so I'm looking at this thing and I zoom up to the eye, and it truly looked like it was wearing I was just looking with one eye. This thing was the size of a baseball, but it truly looked like it had sunglasses on. It was the weirdest thing. Both eyes had big black things around them, and they were just solid black. You couldn't see an eyeball or anything. So it makes me wonder if maybe they've evolved to have some kind of a lens, almost like an alligator has when they go underwater, that other lens slides down over their eye to protect their eyes. People always say that Bigfoots are more nocturnal, so it makes me wonder, like I said, if maybe what's covering their eyes is some kind of a darker lens so that they don't damage their eyes. Because I would imagine their eyes are probably not that large. I know they're large, but I don't think they're that big. Anyways, so getting back to what I was talking about before. So I met Joe off of Facebook, and Joe said, hey Matt, you need to come up here. I need to show you around. And he's like, I got tree bends everywhere. I've got trees broken off, 10 plus feet high. I've got tree trunks, not tree limbs, tree trunks, broken 12, 13, 14 feet high. I've had multiple sightings. Before he moved on to this property, 18 years ago, whatever, Joe was a non-believer. Joe didn't believe in Bigfoots. No, he does. But, he, at first, I really like to have him out here to have a discussion with him. We'll have to get him on here. But if you listen to the YouTube video or our episode on Joe's camp, I interview him and he talks about his first experiences out there and how creepy it was because the property was so overgrown supposedly when he first moved out there. And he went through and just chopped down brush, and they were having to use chainsaws just to get in, and they finally got a tent set up that night, and they had all kinds of activity. And his friend that was working with him they were both just terrified of whatever was going on. So as time has gone on, he started having more encounters and more encounters and more encounters. And something else that, we started going up there, like I said, about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. And we've been researching ever since. We leave trail cams up there just to see if we can get anything. We haven't left any recently. But we've had strange things happen to our trail cams. When I first went out with him, he put me on the back of a four-wheel and said, get on, we're going to go search my property. I want to show you a bunch of stuff. And I've seen trees bent over before, and I've seen tree structures, and I've seen blinds created by Bigfoots. But this just took my breath away. It was like, holy crap. As far as you can see, there was tree structures, there was blinds, and there was trees just snapped off. 4 or 5 inch diameter trees just snapped off, and footprints. Oh my God, the footprints. Some of them were 16, 18 inches long. I was like, holy moly! I've got a Bigfoot. In fact, I've been accused of being Bigfoot every once in a while, but I don't do that. But my feet are size 13 wides, so I put my foot next to this. I try to make a footprint of my own, and it looks like a little kid's footprint next to mine. I mean, they're just tiny. And whatever's making these prints, well, I know it's making prints because I've actually seen them. But oh my God, his place is just amazing. And the more we research it, the more activity we get, and the more crazy things that happen. And you'll see it in our episode. We documented eye shine. We documented howls. We documented things moving through the brush. Poor Christy, one of our team members, and I went out there multiple times, and we created 3 different points. We were going to try and triangulate where things were. So she took the creepy forest. I went up to the creepy graveyard, and the landowner, Joe, stayed at his camp. And so I was going to do screams, Christy was going to do whoops, and then Joe was going to do some knocks, and Christy was going to do some knocks too. So we're sitting there, and I started off with a couple of whoops, and then Christy did a knock, and I think I told Joe a couple seconds later, okay, do another knock. We confused the hell out of these things. There was a god-awful scream in response. It went on for, 5 or 6 seconds, but it was loud. Way louder than audio or video you could ever imagine our audio video. And it was distant. It was probably a couple miles away, but you could still feel it reverberate off your body. And as Christy's down there, she's contacting me over the radio. Matt, I don't feel comfortable here. There's something right in front of me, and it's pitch black in the forest down where she was. She's got that little tiny Sony Handycam screen that's like 1x1 that she's trying to see through, but you could hear something walk around, and she actually caught eye shine, and I think it wasn't clear enough to put in the video, unfortunately, but she did catch what looks like part of a Bigfoot, and that thing was big. That was at least 10 plus feet tall. Big, huge thing, kind of pierced around a tree, and she's probably about 5'4" or so. And this thing's at least double her height. And you just see the eye shine really quickly. But I'll tell you what, that freaked her out. And so another time, she and I went back, and we were walking through the forest during the day. We found a deer carcass, and so we're like, okay, we documented it, and we kept walking. We wanted to walk up to where the old cemetery is, and so we had to bushwhack our way through on one of his little trails that he had carved a while ago because it was all overgrown. And as we went through, there was bushes that were taller than us, and so we carved our way through it, and we pushed the bushes aside and stuff like that, and we got up to where we were going and kind of did the EVP session up by the old cemetery. And on our way back, we found like tree trunks that had been broken off, dragged across the trail. So we're like, okay, well, it might be a Bigfoot. I don't think Joe would have done this. And so as we kept going back, like the bushes had been basically pulled back together. Like something literally pulled them across so we couldn't get through. So we had to recut our way back through, even though we had used some machete to cut through there. And then we found the deer carcass later that night had been moved about 100 feet up the path. And we also found a crap ton more new tree structures and stuff like that. But we had, oh my god, we had so many crazy experiences. Another couple of things that weren't actually shown in the video just because the video, number one, well, I had a personal experience, an actual sighting. We got there one night, and where Joe lives, when it storms, it storms. It just rains and rains and rains. So it had been raining off and on, and then it just started pouring, and the lightning was going off. I mean, when the lightning flashed, you could see all the way through the trees for 100, 200 yards clearly from inside his trailer. This was around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was just trying to get some sleep. We had just finished for the night. I was laying in one of his back bunks, and I'm looking out the window, and there was a flash. And I kid you not, standing between 2 trees, there's a freaking Bigfoot. And I can see it. I can see the water just dripping off the hair. And everybody says, oh, well, when it starts to rain and stuff, it gets, the weather comes in, they go and hide. Well, this one wasn't hiding. It was standing in clear sight. I saw it, it saw me, and it was probably 20, 30 feet away. It wasn't huge. It was maybe 8 or 9 feet tall. It wasn't one of those huge, stocky ones that was 5 or 6 feet wide. It's probably a little bit bigger than me, maybe 3.5, 4 feet wide. And it was just standing there, just looking at me. And so that was pretty cool. Another time, Joe's windows in his trailer are pretty darkly tinted. But if you have the lights on at night, they can see you, and they can also see in. But it's kind of like one of those, if you were in a car with the dark tinted windows, and you're trying to look in and there's no light on inside, you can't see what's going on inside the car. Well, he's done that to his trailer because he's afraid of the Bigfoots. They come down and they'll look into his trailer. Follows a lot of the reports that you hear these days. So anyways, he's sitting on one side of the trailer, I'm sitting on the other, and Christy and I are having a conversation about what our plan of attack for that night is. This is probably around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And I look out, and well, no, it was earlier than that. It was just before daybreak, so it wasn't quite sunny yet. But I'm looking out, and I see these green eyes looking back at me. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. So I actually grabbed my phone, and unfortunately I forgot to turn my phone sideways, but I recorded this. And it was because of the dark windows, it was very hard to see the eye shine. But that thing must have been 5 or 6 feet tall, maybe a little taller. It wasn't one of the large ones, it was probably a juvenile. And it was just coming down, hanging out, checking out what we were doing. That's one of Joe's reports, is that he always felt like they were watching him. They'd come in and play pranks on him. They'd move stuff around his trailer. He'd find tools missing. I think he said a couple times he would put stuff out. I mean, he'd leave something out, and he'd come back and find something else in its place, like a rock or a stick or something like that. And then later on, 6 months later, 7 months later, they would return it, and he'd find it right back where it was, which is cool. Joe also used to put corn out to feed his deer, because he hunts on his property, so he has a corn feeder. And this thing's, if you're a hunter, you know what I'm talking about. But this thing's pretty big. I mean, it sits about 6 feet in the air, and it's automated. It's got a little motor at the bottom, and then the top of it looks like a giant, I don't know, not a balloon, but just a giant air compressor. So anyways, he was telling us that basically sometime during the night, one time, he saw them over there eating corn, the juveniles eating corn off that. And a couple weeks later, for some reason, they had gone through and dismantled the motor. He left for a couple hours, came back, found the motor completely, taken apart. He had trail cams over there facing that thing. It didn't catch anything, which is the strangest thing. It didn't set off the trail cams, which it's just a mystery to me how that happened. We checked the batteries, we checked everything. They took pictures of us, just didn't take pictures of whatever decided to dismantle his corn feeder for the deer. So, but yeah, just a very cool place. I had multiple sightings. I don't want to talk too much about my sightings because a lot of them we actually documented. If you're watching the YouTube video, which will be out tomorrow, you'll see we got one on trap cam, and then we also got a lot of eye shine. We were like surrounded. This was a place where you didn't have to go out and search for them. They would come to you. You would just basically sit at the table, or you know, sit still, sit around a campfire, and if you have the video camera on, you could see the eye shine. And these things were, the eye shine was not small. Number one, it's at least a foot, at least a foot apart. And our eyes are what, 3 or 4 inches, apart from each other. These things' eyes were, some of them were a foot or more apart from each other. And the eyes were, the eye shine at least, was the size of some of them were up to the size of baseballs or bigger. So that just tells you how big they were. One of the last encounters I'll talk about before I get off here is I pulled up to his camp one time, and Joe and I were sitting there talking, and when we looked over, he has a blind that was about 30-40 feet away from us, again, because he hunts deer on his property, or at least he used to. And so he and I were chit-chatting about all the activity he had, and I caught movement to my left. I was actually facing him, and behind him, he was standing basically right to the right of where his blind was on an angle. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the heck? And I look over and I see something standing in front of his blind and kind of ducking behind a tree branch. Now that tree branch was about 15 feet in the air. I know because we actually took a measuring tape and we went out there and we measured it. Now his blind is 6 feet wide, and it stands about, the top of it where the roof is about 8 feet in the air. And where that branch was, because we took a ladder, we went out and measured the top of that branch. That branch stands 15 feet. This thing was wider than his blind, and its arm was up where the branch was, because I saw the branch move down, which is what caught my attention at first. It pulled the branch down and kind of ducked down to look around the corner. So the head was at least almost 15 feet tall. The arm reached up and pulled the branch down because it was kind of like trying to watch what we were doing, I'm guessing. Joe was saying that, yeah, they probably are getting used to the sound of your car. He said whenever he would come home, sometimes he would catch them running back into the forest. They'd be down, out in the open, and he would actually see them, and he would see them duck back into the trees as he come in onto his property. He has a really long driveway. His driveway is probably 100 feet long to get up to where his camp is. But yeah, that I've seen them that big before, but that was scary. I mean, imagine something that has a 6 foot wide torso. That's like maybe three of me, and put me on top of myself about 1.5 times. That's a big boy. And up at Joe's place, another thing we haven't shown is we found a 22-inch footprint one time. And I tell you what, I look like I have about a size 3 or 4 footprint next to it. Crazy crap. So anyways, like I said, we're going to try and get Joe on to our podcast one of these days as a guest. Really love to hear him talk about more stories that you guys haven't heard today. He's got a lot of stories. He's had probably 30 or 40 sightings since he's lived on this property, over 18 years. He's, some of them were frustrating for him, some of them were cool, some of them were like freaked him out. So anyways, You guys have a great day. I appreciate you listening. Please go to our YouTube channel. It's linked down below, and catch Joe's Camp. If you're a Bigfoot believer, or if you're not a believer, you may be a believer after you watch this. Like I said, we spent a year documenting our experiences at Joe's Camp. And we're still doing investigations, but we've kind of toned it down a little bit. We're doing investigations in and around this property now. But we will be getting back to this camp sooner or later. But yeah, just a really cool location. Caught a lot of evidence, really cool stuff. Very interesting. So again, please go watch our YouTube show episode on Joe's Camp. We really appreciate all your support, and thank you guys for supporting our channel here. Again, we love you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.